The Great Hall of the Galactic Federation buzzed with the voices of 847 different species. Admiral Kethvar stood at his podium, his blue-scaled hands gripping the metal edge as he looked out at the sea of alien faces. His yellow eyes burned with frustration that had been building for decades. "How long must we honor these ancient restrictions?" he demanded, his voice carrying clearly through the translation devices worn by every delegate. "The boundary protocols have kept us from exploring thousands of star systems for 50,000 years. We call ourselves the masters of the galaxy, yet we cower behind invisible walls like frightened children." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Some species nodded in agreement while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The Zephyrians had always been aggressive, always pushing for expansion. Most other races preferred the peace that the boundaries had maintained. Dr. Yilnara rose from her seat in the research section. Her silver skin gleamed under the hall's lights as she activated her speaking device. "Admiral Kethvar forgets why these boundaries exist. The progenitor wars nearly destroyed all life in this galaxy. Entire star systems were erased from existence. The boundaries were created by those who survived, as protection for future generations." Kethavar's tail lashed behind him, a sign of his growing anger. "That was 50,000 years ago, Doctor. We are not the same primitive beings who fought those wars. Our technology has advanced beyond anything the progenitors could imagine. We have weapons that can crack planets, and shields that can stop supernovas. What could possibly threaten us now?" The hall fell silent. Everyone knew that the Zephyrians had been building their military strength. Their ships were the most advanced in the Federation, their weapons the most destructive. If any species could challenge whatever lay beyond the boundaries, it would be them. Chancellor Morptha, an ancient being whose species had been among the founders of the Federation, spoke with a voice like grinding stone. "The boundaries protect us from something far more dangerous than any weapon we possess. They protect us from ourselves. Some knowledge is too dangerous to seek." "Knowledge?" Kethvar laughed, a harsh sound that made several nearby delegates flinch. "You speak of knowledge as if it were a monster. Knowledge is power. Power is survival. We have become weak because we refuse to grow." Dr. Yilnara touched her personal data pad, bringing up readings from the Federation's long-range sensors. "Admiral, you should see this. 3 months ago, our deepest space monitors detected unusual energy signatures from the Saul system. That star is located within one of the oldest boundary zones." The hall erupted in shocked whispers. The Saul system was legendary among researchers. It sat behind quantum barriers so complex that no ship had ever successfully penetrated them. Most scientists believed nothing could survive in such isolation. Kethvar's eyes widened with excitement. "Energy signatures? What kind?" "Advanced propulsion systems, communication networks, power generation on a massive scale. There is definitely intelligent life in that system, and they have technology. Then we have our answer," Kethvar declared, spreading his arms wide to address the entire assembly. "A species has developed behind the boundaries. They could be a threat to everything we have built, or they could be valuable allies. Either way, we must make contact." Chancellor Morptha's ancient face creased with worry. "The Saul boundary is the most dangerous of all restricted zones. The quantum barriers there are not like the others. They were specifically designed to contain something." "Contain what?" Kethvar demanded. "Monsters? Demons? Or perhaps just another species that we could easily defeat if necessary?" Dr. Yilnara had been studying her readings more carefully. Her face grew pale as she discovered new information buried in the data files. "Admiral, I have been researching the historical records about Saul. There are references to something called the Sleeping Guardians, and warnings about the price of awakening those who chose exile. Riddles and fairy tales," Kethvar dismissed with a wave of his hand. "Written by primitives who feared their own shadows." The debate continued for hours. Species after species rose to speak. Some supported Kethvar's call for exploration and contact. They argued that the Federation had a duty to investigate potential threats. Others sided with Dr. Yilnara and Chancellor Morptha, insisting that the boundaries had kept them safe for 50,000 years. Finally, the vote was called. The massive hall fell silent as each species cast their decision. The results appeared, on screens throughout the chamber: 412 votes to maintain the boundaries, 435 votes to authorize exploration. By a margin of just 23 votes, the Galactic Federation had decided to breach the Sol system's ancient barriers. Kethvar smiled triumphantly as he watched the numbers. "The decision is made. I will personally lead the first contact fleet to Sol. we will discover what secrets have been hidden from us for so long. Dr. Yilnara gathered her research materials with shaking hands. Something deep in her scientist's instincts told her that this was a terrible mistake. She had spent years studying the few remaining records from the progenitor wars. Most of the data had been deliberately destroyed, but what remained painted a picture of conflict so devastating that entire civilizations had chosen to limit their own growth rather than risk repeating it. "Chancellor," she said, approaching the ancient being as the assembly began to disperse, "I believe we are making a grave error. The references I found suggest that Saul was not just any boundary zone. It was special. It was where something chose to exile itself." The Chancellor's old eyes met hers. "I fear you may be right, Doctor, but the decision has been made. Perhaps it is time for this generation to learn the lessons that our ancestors tried to spare us." Within days, the largest fleet in Federation history began assembling. 300 ships representing dozens of species gathered at the edge of Saul's boundary zone. Kethvar's flagship, the Dominion, led the formation. It was a massive vessel, 5 kilometers long and bristling with the most advanced weapons the Federation could produce. The quantum barriers that surrounded Saul appeared on their screens as shimmering walls of energy. They pulsed with patterns that hurt to look at directly, as if reality itself was twisted in their presence. Federation scientists had studied these barriers for centuries without understanding how they worked. "All ships report ready," came the communication from Kethvar's bridge. "Prepare to make history. Today we cross a boundary that has stood for 50,000 years. Today we discover what lies beyond." The fleet moved forward in perfect formation. As they approached the quantum barriers, strange things began happening to their instruments. Sensors showed readings that made no sense. Communications became filled with whispers in languages that no Federation species recognized. Dr. Yilnara, aboard the research vessel Inquiry, made one final attempt to stop what was about to happen. "Admiral, I am detecting massive gravitational anomalies throughout the Sol system. Whatever is in there, it is not natural. We should reconsider." "Doctor," Kethvar replied with confidence, "in 30 seconds, we will have our answers." The fleet crossed the boundary. Reality twisted around them as the quantum barriers parted. For a moment that felt like hours, every ship in the fleet experienced something impossible. Time moved in circles. Space folded in on itself. Colors existed that had no names. Then they were through. Floating in normal space within the Sol system, sensors immediately began detecting planets, moons, asteroids. It looked like any other star system except for the massive energy signatures coming from the third planet. "Scan complete," reported the fleet's chief scientist. 8 planets, multiple moons, asteroid belt. The third planet shows signs of advanced civilization. Population appears to be in the billions. Kethvar smiled. A primitive species with billions of members would make excellent slaves for the Federation. "Send them our standard first contact message. Offer them the choice to join us peacefully or face the consequences." The message was transmitted on multiple frequencies in over 200 languages. It was a simple ultimatum that the Federation had used successfully on countless worlds. Submit or be destroyed. The response came not in words, but in the sudden appearance of objects throughout the Sol system that had not been there moments before. Massive structures emerged from empty space, as if they had been invisible until now. Dr. Yilnara's instruments went insane, trying to analyze what they were seeing. "Admiral, I am reading artificial structures throughout this system. They are enormous. Some of them are larger than our biggest space stations." "Hidden defense platforms?" Kethvar asked, though his confidence was beginning to waver. "I do not know what they are. But, Admiral, they have been watching us since we arrived." Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the Federation fleet through sensors that could see across multiple dimensions. Her dark eyes showed no surprise, only the calm readiness of someone who had trained their entire life for this moment. "Ma'am, we're receiving their transmission," reported Lieutenant Torres from the communication station. His young face was tense with excitement. "Standard subjugation demand. Broadcast in 203 languages. They're offering us a choice between surrender and destruction." Sarah almost smiled. These aliens had no idea what they were dealing with. "Let them wait," she said calmly. "Contact Admiral Morrison. Tell her the day we've been preparing for has finally arrived." The Federation fleet held position at the edge of Earth's detection range, expecting a quick response from what they assumed was a primitive civilization. They had done this dance countless times before. Most species took hours or days to respond, usually with desperate pleas for mercy or foolish attempts at negotiation. Aboard the Dominion, Admiral Kethvar grew impatient as hours passed without reply. "Perhaps they do not understand our message," suggested his second-in-command, Commander Rylak. "Their technology may be too primitive to translate our languages." Dr. Yilnara, monitoring from her research ship, was studying the energy readings from throughout the Sol system. What she was seeing made no sense according to everything the Federation knew about physics. "Admiral, these power signatures are impossible. Some of these structures are generating more energy than our entire fleet combined." "Impossible," Kethvar dismissed. "No primitive species could harness such power. Your instruments must be malfunctioning." But even as he spoke, something was happening throughout the Sol system. The massive structures that had appeared earlier were moving. Not through space, but through dimensions that Federation science barely understood. They phased in and out of normal reality, existing in multiple places at once. On Earth, President Elena Vasquez sat in the underground command center that had been built for this exact scenario. Around her, the most advanced computer systems ever created processed information from thousands of monitoring stations throughout the solar system. "Madam President," said General Harrison, his weathered face grim with the weight of history. "The aliens have 300 ships, standard galactic technology, mostly antimatter-based weapons and quantum shielding. Nothing we haven't planned." 4. Elena nodded. Humanity had been preparing for this day for over 50,000 years. Every generation had added to Earth's defenses, building them not just in normal space, but in the hidden dimensions that other species couldn't even detect. "Activate the silent sentinels," she ordered. "Let them see what they're really facing." Throughout the Sol system, structures that had been invisible to Federation sensors suddenly became visible. They emerged from stealth like ancient monsters awakening from sleep. Each one dwarfed the largest ship in the Federation fleet. The silent sentinels were humanity's first line of defense, built into asteroids and hidden in the empty space between planets. But they were not just weapons platforms. They were demonstrations of a technology so advanced that it violated the known laws of physics. Aboard the Dominion, alarms began screaming as sensors detected the massive structures appearing around them. "Admiral," shouted the tactical officer, "we are surrounded," reading over 50 large structures, each one measuring between 10 and 20 kilometers in length. Kethvar stared at the tactical display in shock. The objects were arranged in a perfect sphere around his fleet, positioned with mathematical precision that would have required planning on a scale he could barely comprehend. "How is this possible?" he whispered. "How did they hide structures of that size?" Dr. Yilnara was frantically analyzing her sensor data. "Admiral, these objects are not following normal physics. They are existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. This technology is beyond anything in our records, even from the progenitor wars." Commander Rylak's voice was tight with fear as he reported from the sensor station. "Sir, the objects are scanning us. But their scans are not like anything we understand. They are reading our ships down to the molecular level. They know everything about us." On the bridge of the UES Defiance, Captain Chen received confirmation. From each silent sentinel, every Federation ship had been analyzed, cataloged, and targeted. Their weapons, their shields, their crew, their weaknesses, everything was now known to humanity's defense network. "Signal from Earth Command," reported Lieutenant Torres. "We are authorized to respond to the aliens' message." Sarah nodded. "Open a channel to the lead alien ship. Let's introduce ourselves properly." The transmission that reached the Dominion was unlike anything the Federation had ever received. It came not just through normal communication channels, but through quantum frequencies that bypassed their shields entirely. The voice that spoke was calm, professional, and spoke in perfect Zephyrian. "Admiral Kethvar of the Galactic Federation," Captain Chen said, her words reaching him as if she were standing on his bridge. "I am Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth Systems. You have entered our space without permission and threatened our people with destruction. This was unwise." Kethvar found his voice, though it came out as more of a croak. "How do you know my name? How are you speaking my language?" "We have been listening to your communications for decades, Admiral. We know about your Federation, your species, your military capabilities. We know about the vote that brought you here and the warnings you chose to ignore." Dr. Yilnara felt ice forming in her veins as she realized the implications. "Admiral, if they have been listening to us, then they have had decades to prepare for our arrival. They knew we were coming. You offered us a choice, Captain Chen continued. Submit to your authority or face destruction. We decline both options. Instead, we offer you a choice. Leave our system immediately, or learn why our ancestors chose exile over conquest. Kethvar's pride overrode his growing fear. No primitive species spoke to the Galactic Federation with such arrogance. You are surrounded by the most powerful fleet in galactic history. Your structures may be large, but size means nothing against advanced weapons. Surrender now, or face the consequences. The response came not in words, but in action. Commander. Rylak screamed as his sensors showed one of the Federation's scout ships moving to perform a detailed scan of Earth. The small vessel, the Swift Wing, approached the third planet with confidence, its crew eager to gather intelligence on humanity's homeworld. The silent sentinel positioned near Earth's moon responded with a single pulse of energy. The Federation scouts watched in horror as their ship simply stopped existing. Not destroyed, not disabled. It ceased to be, as if it had never been built at all. Report, Kethvar shouted, his voice breaking with shock. The Swift Wing is gone, sir, reported the tactical officer. No debris, no energy signature, no trace that it ever existed. Whatever they hit us with, it completely erased the ship and crew from reality. Dr. Yilnara was studying her instruments with growing terror. Admiral, the energy pulse that destroyed the Swift Wing somehow bypassed every law of physics we understand. It did not travel through space, it simply caused the target to stop existing. Throughout the Federation fleet, panic was beginning to set in. They had expected to face primitive rockets and crude nuclear weapons. Instead, they found themselves surrounded by technologies that treated the fundamental laws of reality as suggestions. Captain Chen's voice came through their communications again, still calm and professional. That was a demonstration, Admiral. Your scout ship attempted to scan our homeworld without permission. We removed the threat. Your remaining ships may leave unharmed, but only if they leave immediately. Kethvar tried to rally his courage. You destroyed one small ship. We have 300 vessels armed with antimatter weapons. We can crack your planet's crust and boil your oceans. Please try, came the reply. The Admiral ordered his fleet to open fire on the nearest silent sentinel. Every ship in the formation unleashed their most powerful weapons. Antimatter missiles, quantum disruptors, plasma cannons, enough firepower to destroy entire moons rained down on the human structure. The weapons struck their target in a blaze of energy that lit up space for thousands of kilometers. The Federation crews watched their screens, waiting to see the destruction they had caused. When the energy cleared, the silent sentinel was unchanged. The massive structure had not even been scratched. Worse, it was rotating slowly to bring new weapon arrays to bear on the alien fleet. Impossible, whispered Kethvar. Nothing can withstand that much firepower. Dr. Yilnara's instruments were showing readings that made her question her own sanity. Admiral, the human structure absorbed our entire attack. The energy did not dissipate or reflect, it was simply taken in and stored. They are using our own weapons to power their systems. Captain Chen's voice came through their communications one final time. Admiral, you have now seen 2 demonstrations of human technology. You cannot hurt us, but we can erase you from existence, at will. However, we are not the monsters you might think us to be. We will give you one chance to reconsider your position. Kethvar tried to order a retreat, but discovered something that filled him with absolute terror. The war began at exactly 1427 Earth Standard Time, when Admiral Kethvar, driven by desperation and wounded pride, ordered his fleet to attack Earth directly. His 300 ships moved in perfect formation, their weapons charging for a bombardment that could turn a planet's surface to molten glass. They never reached their target. Commander Marcus Webb sat in the captain's chair of the UES Prometheus, watching the alien fleet approach through sensors that existed in 17 different dimensions. His weathered hands were steady on the controls as he gave the order that would change galactic history forever. All ships, engage the enemy. Show them what humanity has learned in 50,000 years of isolation. The human response was unlike anything the Federation had ever encountered in their long history of conquest. Where they expected desperate defensive actions, they found calculated aggression. Where they expected primitive weapons, they found technologies that rewrote the rules of warfare. The Prometheus and her sister ships did not simply appear on Federation sensors, they materialized from within the fabric of space-time itself. One moment the alien fleet faced empty void, the next they were surrounded by vessels that seemed to exist in multiple locations simultaneously. Aboard the Dominion, Tactical Officer Zeffel screamed warnings that made no sense. "Admiral, enemy ships are firing, but the weapons are not traveling through space. They are appearing directly inside our shields." Kethvar watched in horror as his most advanced warship, the Retribution, simply folded in on itself as a human weapon attacked it from inside its own structure. The massive vessel collapsed into a point of light and vanished, taking its crew of 3,000 with it. "Impossible," he whispered. "No weapon can bypass quantum shielding like that." Dr. Yilnara was frantically working at her research station, trying to understand what she was witnessing. "Admiral, the humans are not using energy weapons as we understand them. They are manipulating fundamental forces directly. They are making reality itself their weapon." The Federation fleet tried to fight back with everything they had. Antimatter missiles screamed through space, only to have human ships step sideways, into dimensions where the missiles could not follow. Quantum disruptors fired at maximum power, their energy simply absorbed and redirected back at their creators. Commander Webb studied the tactical display with the calm focus of a chess master. Every move the aliens made had been anticipated, every strategy countered before it could be employed. Humanity had spent millennia preparing for this exact scenario. "Target their command ships," he ordered. "Show them precision." The UES Athena, a sleek vessel that seemed to be made of crystallized starlight, moved through the alien formation like a dancer. It did not dodge enemy fire. It simply existed in the spaces between the shots, moving through gaps in time that lasted nanoseconds. The Federation watched in growing panic as their carefully coordinated battle plans fell apart. Ships that should have been destroyed continued fighting. Weapons that should have connected passed harmlessly through targets that flickered between realities. Admiral Kethvar's second-in-command, Commander Rylak, was monitoring communications across the fleet. "Sir, our ships are reporting impossible readings. The human vessels are not following the laws of physics. They are moving backward through time to avoid our attacks." "That is impossible," Kethvar snarled, but his certainty was cracking. Everything he had believed about the universe was being proven wrong with each passing moment. On Earth, President Vasquez watched the battle from the deep command bunker that had been built beneath the Himalayas. Around her, holographic displays showed the conflict in real time, tracking every human and alien vessel with perfect precision. "Casualties?" she asked General Harrison. "None on our side," he reported. "The aliens have lost 47 ships so far. We're being very careful not to completely destroy them. Just disable and capture when possible." Elena nodded. This had always been part of the plan. Humanity did not want to commit genocide, even against invaders. Every Federation ship that could be saved represented knowledge, culture, and lives that had value beyond the current conflict. Dr. Yilnara had managed to establish a private communication channel with one of the human research vessels. The response she received changed her understanding of everything she thought she knew about galactic history. "Dr. Yilnara," came the voice of Dr. Amanda Foster from the human ship Discovery. "I have been studying your species' records. You are one of the few who questioned this invasion. Perhaps you are ready to learn the truth." "What truth?" Yilnara asked, even as explosions lit up the space around her research ship. "Your Federation believes that the progenitor wars ended 50,000 years ago with the victory of peaceful species over aggressive ones. This is only partially correct. The wars ended when the most dangerous species in the galaxy chose to exile themselves rather than continue fighting." Images flowed through the communication link, historical records that had been hidden from the galaxy for millennia. They showed a conflict that had consumed entire star systems, weapons that could erase matter from existence, ships that could travel through time to attack their enemies before battles even began. Humanity's ancestors were not the victims of those wars, Dr. Foster continued. They were the ones winning them. They were the most advanced weapon designers in galactic history, and they realized that their own success was becoming a threat to all life in the universe. Yilnara stared at the historical data with growing horror and understanding. They chose exile to protect everyone else from what they could become. Yes. And for 50,000 years we have used that isolation to develop beyond anything our ancestors ever imagined. Not for conquest, but for protection. We became the guardians that the galaxy needed, even though it never knew we existed. The battle raged for 6 hours, but it was never really a contest. The Federation fleet was fighting with technology they understood against an enemy that had transcended those limitations. Every alien strategy was anticipated, every weapon countered, every desperate maneuver already planned for. Commander Webb watched as the last of the Federation's heavy cruisers was disabled by a weapon that simply convinced its reactor that physics worked differently. The massive ship went dead in space, its crew unharmed but completely helpless. "Signal all units," he ordered. "Cease fire and begin rescue operations. The demonstration is complete." Admiral Kethvar found himself aboard a ship that no longer responded to his commands. Every system had been shut down by human technology that had somehow rewritten his ship's computer code from across space. Around him, his bridge crew sat, in stunned silence. "Admiral," whispered Commander Rylak, "we have lost everything. 300 ships, the most advanced fleet in galactic history, and we could not even scratch their hulls. The Federation survivors were brought aboard human vessels for medical treatment and debriefing. They found themselves in ships that were impossibly large on the inside, with corridors that seemed to stretch for kilometers, despite being housed in vessels that appeared much smaller from outside. Dr. Yilnara was escorted to the medical bay of the UES Harmony by Captain Lisa Park, a woman whose calm demeanor could not hide the sadness in her eyes. "You seem different from your military personnel," Yilnara observed as her minor injuries were treated by medical devices that worked like magic. "We never wanted this fight," Captain Park admitted. "For 50,000 years we have lived in isolation, developing our technology and our society in preparation for the day when the galaxy would inevitably cross our boundaries. We hoped that day would never come." "Then why did you become so powerful? Why develop weapons that can break the laws of physics?" Captain Park was quiet for a long moment. "Because we remembered what happened the last time galactic civilization grew too ambitious. We became powerful enough to stop it from happening again, even if that meant becoming the very thing that others might fear." As the battle ended and rescue operations began, the full scope of humanity's capabilities became clear to the surviving Federation personnel. Human ships moved through space with grace that defied understanding. Their crews worked with a coordination that suggested telepathic communication. Their technology accomplished tasks that should have been impossible. But perhaps most disturbing of all was the realization that humanity had been holding back. The weapons and tactics they had displayed were impressive, but it was clear they were demonstrations rather than desperate measures. These humans had been playing with their opponents, showing just enough power to make their point without revealing their true capabilities. Admiral Kethvar, now a prisoner aboard the UES Terra Nova, was brought to meet Commander Webb in person. The human officer looked younger than expected, with kind eyes that carried the weight of terrible responsibility. "Admiral," Webb said calmly, "your species are conquerors by nature. You have spent thousands of years expanding across the galaxy, subjugating weaker civilizations and taking what you want. This is why the boundaries exist, to protect the galaxy from species like yours, and to protect you from species like ours." "What, are you?" Kethvar asked, his voice barely a whisper. "We are what your ancestors feared you might become," Webb replied. Dr. Yilnara sat in the observation lounge of the human research vessel Discovery, staring out at Earth through a window that showed impossible detail. She could see individual cities, weather patterns, even the lights of human civilization sparkling in the darkness. But she could also see something else, energy patterns that moved beneath the planet's surface like the circulation of some massive organism. "Your planet is not natural," she said to Dr. Amanda Foster, who had become her guide to understanding human civilization. "Earth itself has been modified, hasn't it?" Dr. Foster nodded, her expression grave. "What you're seeing is the result of 50,000 years of preparation. Earth is no longer just our homeworld, Dr. Yilnara. It has become something else entirely." Through the observation window, massive structures became visible in Earth's orbit. They had been there all along, but human technology had kept them, invisible to Federation sensors. These were not ships or space stations, but something far more complex, architectural structures that seemed to exist partially outside normal space-time. "Construction platforms?" Yilnara guessed, though she knew it was not that simple. "Reality engines," Dr. Foster corrected. "When our ancestors chose exile, they knew that isolation alone would not be enough. They had to become something that could stand against any threat the galaxy might produce, including the threat they themselves might become." Captain Sarah Chen joined them at the observation window, her uniform bearing insignia that Yilnara was beginning to understand represented not just military rank but guardianship of terrible knowledge. "Dr. Yilnara," Chen said, "your research into our history has been impressive. You're one of the few Federation citizens who questioned the wisdom of this invasion. That's why we're going to show you something that we've never shown to outsiders. The Discovery moved toward Earth. But instead of following a normal orbital approach, it simply stepped sideways through dimensions and emerged inside the planet's atmosphere. They were flying through massive cavern systems that had been carved deep beneath Earth's crust. What Yilnara saw there broke her understanding of what was possible. Cities that existed in folded space, where millions of people lived in areas that should have been able to hold only thousands. Manufacturing facilities that created materials by convincing atoms to behave according to different physical laws. Power generation systems that drew energy from the quantum foam that underlaid reality itself. "How many people live on Earth?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Approximately 100 billion, Dr. Foster replied casually. "Though the exact number changes depending on which dimensions you count. Impossible. Your planet's surface could not support that many people." Captain Chen smiled. "Our planet's surface is just where we started. Humanity has been growing inward and outward for millennia. We exist in spaces that other species cannot even detect. They travel deeper, past underground cities and manufacturing complexes, until they reached something that made Yilnara's scientific instruments scream with impossible readings. It was a sphere of crystallized energy, kilometers across, suspended, in a cavern that was somehow larger inside than outside. "The heart of Earth," Dr. Foster explained. "Our ancestors built it as the ultimate failsafe. If the galaxy ever faced a threat that could not be stopped by conventional means, Earth itself could be activated as a weapon." "What kind of weapon?" "One that could rewrite the physical laws throughout an entire galaxy," Captain Chen said quietly. "One that could make aggressive war impossible by changing the fundamental nature of matter and energy. It would end all conflict permanently, but it would also end technological advancement for every species." Yilnara understood the implications immediately. "You could force the entire galaxy back to a primitive state, if necessary, but that has always been our last option. We prefer to find better solutions." They were interrupted by an emergency, communication from the human fleet. Commander Webb's voice came through clearly. "Captain Chen, Admiral Kethvar is attempting to contact his home government. He's trying to call for reinforcements." Chen sighed. "I was hoping he would be wiser than that. Dr. Yilnara, it appears we need to provide a more comprehensive demonstration. The Discovery emerged from Earth's hidden depths to find the Federation's surviving ships arranged in a defensive formation. Admiral Kethvar had managed to repair enough systems to establish long-range communications, and he was desperately trying to send word back to Federation space about what they had encountered. His messages were not getting through. Every transmission was intercepted, analyzed, and gently redirected by human communication systems that existed in dimensions the Federation could not detect." "Admiral," came Captain Chen's voice over the Dominion speakers, "you are trying to call for help. This suggests you have not yet understood your situation." Kethvar's response was filled with desperate anger. "You may have defeated one fleet, but the Federation has thousands of ships. We have planetary defense systems, space fortresses, weapons that can crack moons. When our reinforcements arrive, you will face the full might of 800 civilizations." "Admiral," Chen replied patiently, "your reinforcements will never come. Would you like to know why?" The answer came in the form of a holographic display that appeared throughout the Federation fleet. It showed their galaxy from a perspective none of them had ever seen, not as a collection of stars and planets, but as a complex web of energy, patterns, and dimensional boundaries. "For 50,000 years, Chen's voice continued, humanity has been watching your galaxy develop. We have monitoring stations in every major star system. We have defense platforms around every significant world. We have been invisible, but we have always been there." The holographic display zoomed in on Federation space, revealing structures that had been hidden throughout their territory. Massive platforms disguised as asteroids, monitoring stations built into the coronas of suns, defense networks that existed in the spaces between dimensions. Dr. Yilnara stared at the display with growing horror. "You have been surrounding us for millennia. The entire galaxy is already under your control." "Not control," Dr. Foster corrected. "Protection. We have spent 50,000 years making sure that no single species could become dominant enough to threaten galactic peace. When your Zephyrian people began building their military beyond reasonable limits, we made sure their weapons development hit certain obstacles. When the hegemony wars threatened to consume 3 star systems, we provided intelligence to their enemies that ended the conflict quickly." Admiral Kethvar was beginning to understand the scope of what they faced. "You have been manipulating, Galactic history. We have been preventing galactic catastrophe, Captain Chen replied. The progenitor wars nearly destroyed all life in this galaxy. We have spent 50,000 years making sure something like that never happens again. The demonstration continued as human ships throughout the galaxy revealed themselves. Not all of them. That would have caused panic across hundreds of worlds. But enough to make the point clear. The Federation was not facing one isolated human system. They were facing a civilization that had quietly surrounded and monitored their entire galaxy for millennia. Commander Webb appeared on the main screen of the Dominion, his expression serious but not hostile. Admiral, your species are excellent, warriors and strategists. In a conventional conflict between equals, you might very well win. But this is not a conventional conflict, and we are not equals. What are you then? Keithvar demanded. We are the solution to a problem that your species has not yet learned to recognize, Webb replied. Every intelligent species eventually develops the technology to destroy itself and others. Most do not survive this stage of development. Those that do usually become conquerors, spreading their violence across the galaxy until someone stops them. A new voice joined the conversation. President Elena Vasquez speaking from Earth's command center. Admiral Dr. Yilnara honored representatives of the Galactic Federation. You came to our system expecting to find primitives you could enslave or destroy. Instead, you found guardians you never knew existed. Now you face a choice that will determine the future of your entire civilization. The holographic display changed, showing possible futures branching out from this moment. Some showed the Federation continuing its expansion, growing ever more militaristic until it triggered conflicts that consumed entire sectors. Others showed a different path, one where galactic civilization learned to grow in wisdom, rather than just power. We can continue this war, President Vasquez continued, and we will win it completely. Your fleets will be destroyed. Your worlds will be protected from your governments, and your people will be forced to live under our guidance until they learn better ways. Admiral Kethvar's pride warred with his growing understanding of reality. And the alternative? Partnership. Your Federation has knowledge and perspectives that humanity lacks. We have lived in isolation for 50,000 years, developing our power but missing the diversity that comes from working with many different species. Together, we could build something better than either of us could create alone. Dr. Yilnara found her voice. What would such a partnership look like? 3 months after the failed invasion of Saul system, Admiral Kethvar stood in the Great Hall of the Galactic Federation once again. But everything had changed. Where once he had commanded the respect of warriors from across the galaxy, now he faced a silent assembly of species who looked at him with a mixture of fear and curiosity. The Federation had learned about humanity's existence, but the knowledge came with a price. Every species now understood that their entire history had been observed and, when necessary, quietly guided by guardians they had never known existed. Dr. Yilnara rose from her seat in the research section. In the months since her return from human space, she had become the Federation's leading expert on humanity and their technology. Her reports had fundamentally changed how every species viewed their place in the galaxy. Honored delegates, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the translation devices. We face a choice that will determine our future. We can continue as we have, pursuing expansion and military might until we trigger another galactic war. Or we can accept the partnership that humanity has offered us. Chancellor Morptha, ancient and wise, spoke with a voice that carried the weight of millennia. The humans claim to be our guardians. But how do we know they will not become our masters instead? The answer came from an unexpected source. President. Elena Vasquez materialized in the center of the hall as a holographic projection, her image so realistic that several delegates gasped. The technology required to transmit across galactic distances with such clarity was beyond anything the Federation possessed. Chancellor Morptha, she said with a respectful nod, your concern is valid. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. This is why humanity has spent 50,000 years developing not just superior technology, but superior restraint. Words, growled Commander Rylak from his position behind Admiral Kethvar. You could easily conquer us all. Why should we trust your promises? President Vasquez smiled. Because we are going to prove our good intentions through actions. Commander Rylak, your homeworld of Zetha Prime has been suffering from ecological collapse for the past century. Your scientists estimate that your civilization has perhaps 50 years before your planet becomes uninhabitable. The hall fell silent. The ecological crisis on Zetha Prime was a closely guarded secret, known only to the highest levels of the Federation government. We have been aware of your planet's problems for decades, Vasquez continued. And with your permission, we would like to help, not as conquerors or masters, but as neighbors who possess the technology to reverse the damage. The holographic display in the center of the hall shifted to show Zetha Prime as seen from space. The planet's once blue oceans were now a sickly green, choked with algae blooms that had poisoned much of the marine ecosystem. The continents were scarred by massive mining operations and deforestation. This is what your world looks like today, President Vasquez said sadly. But this is what it could look like in 5 years with human assistance. The image changed to show the same planet restored to health. Clear blue oceans, green forests, cities that worked in harmony with nature, rather than destroying it. It was beautiful enough to bring tears to many delegates' eyes. The choice is yours, Vasquez said. We will not force our help on anyone, but we offer it freely to those who accept partnership with humanity. Admiral Kethvar found his voice, though it came out rougher than he intended. What would this partnership require of us? The answer came from Captain Sarah Chen, who appeared alongside President Vasquez's hologram. 3 things, Admiral. First, the development of reality-breaking weapons must end. The technologies that could threaten the stability of space-time itself will be shared with human oversight to ensure they are never used destructively. Murmurs rippled through the hall. Many species had research programs aimed at developing such weapons. Second, Chen continued, conflicts between Federation species must be resolved through negotiation rather than warfare. When diplomacy fails, humanity will serve as mediators. Our technology gives us the ability to enforce peaceful solutions when necessary. And third, asked Dr. Yilnara. Third, the galaxy must accept that some boundaries still exist for good reason. There are regions of space that contain dangers beyond anything you can imagine. These areas will remain off-limits, protected by joint Human Federation monitoring stations. Chancellor Morptha considered this carefully. And in exchange for accepting these restrictions, humanity offers what? President Vasquez's expression grew warm. We offer knowledge that could advance your civilizations by thousands of years, medical technology that could extend lifespans and eliminate diseases, environmental restoration techniques that could heal damaged worlds, transportation systems that could connect the galaxy in ways you never imagined. More importantly, added Captain Chen, we offer protection from threats that the Federation has never encountered. The galaxy is vast, and not all of the dangers in it are from species like yours. There are things in the deep void, remnants of wars fought before your civilizations existed, that could destroy everything you have built. As if to demonstrate this point, the holographic display showed images from the edge of the galaxy. Ancient automated war machines drifted through space, still carrying out programmed missions from conflicts that had ended millions of years ago. Predatory species that consumed entire star systems for resources. Cosmic phenomena that could erase matter from existence. We have been fighting these threats alone for 50,000 years, President Vasquez explained. Working together, we could protect the galaxy far more effectively. The debate that followed lasted for days. Some species, particularly the more militaristic ones, were reluctant to accept restrictions on their weapons development. Others worried about human dominance, despite the evidence that humanity had chosen partnership over conquest. Dr. Yilnara played a crucial role in these discussions, sharing her experiences aboard human ships and her research into their history. They could have conquered us at any time during the past 50,000 years, she reminded the assembly. If domination was their goal, they would have achieved it long ago. Admiral Kethvar, once the strongest voice for military expansion, found himself supporting the human proposal. His defeat had been humbling, but it had also been educational. I have seen their power, he told the assembly, but more importantly, I have seen their restraint. They could have destroyed my fleet completely, but they chose to capture and rescue my people instead. The final vote was closer than many had hoped, but the result was decisive. 634 votes in favor of partnership with humanity, 213 against. The Galactic Compact was born. The changes that followed were remarkable. Within months, human technology began flowing to Federation worlds. Environmental disasters that had seemed unstoppable were reversed. Diseases that had plagued entire species for millennia were cured. Transportation networks that had taken weeks to traverse could now be crossed in hours. But perhaps most importantly, the galaxy began to feel safer. Conflicts that might have erupted into system-wide wars were resolved through human mediation. Pirates and raiders found their bases mysteriously disabled by weapons that appeared from nowhere. Ancient threats from the deep void were dealt with by joint Human Federation task forces. Dr. Yulnara was appointed as the first Federation ambassador to Earth, a position that required her to spend months at a time in human space. During one of her visits, she stood on the observation deck of Luna Station, looking out at Earth's blue marble surface while Admiral Morrison, now her friend rather than her captor, explained the changes happening across the galaxy. Your people adapt quickly, Morrison noted. Some of the younger Federation species are already incorporating human technological principles into their own research. And the older species, slower to change, but they are beginning to see the benefits. Chancellor Morptha's people have begun restoration projects on 3 worlds that were damaged during their industrial expansion period. The hegemony worlds have redirected their military research toward exploration and defense rather than conquest. Yulnara nodded, watching a human transport ship phase into normal space near the station. Even after months of exposure to human technology, the grace and efficiency of their vessels still amazed her. There is something I must ask, she said, carefully. Your people have been guardians of the galaxy for 50,000 years. Now that we know of your existence, does that change your role? Admiral Morrison was quiet for a moment. In some ways, yes. We no longer need to work from the shadows, but in the most important way, nothing has changed. We are still guardians. We still carry the responsibility to protect all life in this galaxy from threats it cannot handle alone. Including threats from humanity itself? Morrison smiled. Especially threats from humanity itself. Dr. Yulnara, power without restraint destroyed the galaxy once before. We have spent 50,000 years learning to be worthy of the power we possess. That learning never ends. As they spoke, reports came in from across the galaxy. The first joint exploration missions were returning from the void beyond Federation space, having encountered and neutralized automated war machines that had been drifting toward inhabited systems.